Thank you to Women's College Hospital for putting on this event. Thank you for you all for being here today and having these really important discussions. And I really want to thank all of the speakers. A lot of the work that you do and have done has influenced the work that we do, and we're really honored to be on this panel with all of you. Considering how new we are to this field in general, we're a group that's been here for been together for just under a year, and we're really excited to be here today. So with that, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Eleni, and I'm the co-founder of Nuance, and I have here with me today Elizabeth, who is our extremely talented lead editor. And we're here to talk to you about a new digital publication called Nuance. And the slides you'll see behind me are flipping through some of the articles and submissions that we have currently online, which you can see at medium.com/shareyournuance. So Nuance is a couple of things. The first is that we are a group of writers, of artists, of community advocates, and we're bound by our mutual experiences as first and second gen immigrant or migrant youth. We produce a digital publication. It's called Nuance. We love this word, so if you hear us talking about it, saying it a lot, we would trademark it if we could. It's a platform really for underrepresented voices to diversify and expand the conversation around sexual health, and to diversify and expand it beyond what we see in the mainstream. It was created and born out of several community needs that we found when we first initially began speaking with young people in Toronto. And I think the very first one is just this need and want to see ourselves represented in media, but at the same time also wanting to have a way to control the narrative that dominates media in terms of our own experiences. And what we do as part of Nuance is we offer this as an opportunity for youth to reclaim that narrative, but also to get paid while doing that. And that's something that has been very much rewarded, I think, in our feedback from the young artists and writers in our community. The second is around having resources that are beyond just how to not get pregnant or how to not get an STI. What we do with each article is we pair it with relevant resources at the bottom of the article where, a lot of it could just be around more reading around body positivity, or, hey, did you hear about that cool new program called SAFE from the Alliance for South Asian Prevention of AIDS, I think that's the acronym ASAP, where it's a new resource for South Asians who are going out in the gay village and may want some additional support in terms of safety. I think the third is around actually the theme of today's conversations, which is building healthy relationships. The third community need we identified around building healthy relationships, one is with yourself, right? So thinking how are you going to build a healthy relationship with yourself takes a lot of reflection, takes a lot of confidence and trust and bravery in tackling and unpacking a lot of the trauma that we have experienced as communities. Building healthy relationships within our communities and understanding that you're not the only one that's going through a lot of these issues. And then also building healthy relationships intra-communities. What we realize is that there are universal elements to being an immigrant or a migrant among different communities, and we want to draw on those experiences and understand within that process how we can be better allies to each other. I think one thing that I always get asked is, what's sort of different about immigrant or migrant sexual health, and what are you seeing that's being reflective of that difference in the pieces that you're getting? And I want to stress that there's no single narrative that encapsulates all of our experiences, but there are definitely themes that we see. Some of which, touch a lot on the role of family and cultural communities in our upbringing and how we discuss these issues around sex, sexuality, sexual health. Family is very often the first place you get information about a lot of this. And so as a result of that, there's a lot of misconceptions or information and ideas that get passed down generation from generation. So through some of our pieces, we've seen explorations of fat phobia, of shadeism, of shaming overall, that gets passed down. Misconceptions around, for me growing up, I was told that I can't use a tampon because it would indicate that I'm no longer a virgin if I use that, right? So stuff like that, I think that really cements our ideas and the way we think, and as a result behave when it comes to some of these issues. The other thing around family is the control of access, right? I think what we hear a lot from our youth is that parents will often accompany you to the doctor, right? And they will not leave. It's not a thing. And I think that in and of itself limits the type of conversations and access of information that you might necessarily have at your disposal. I think there's also, the concept of the fact that your time is not really yours, or your body in some cases is also not yours. Who has ownership over your body, and how that reflects upon your family or communities to what you do to your body is very much a theme in these communities. And then I think the last thing within the aspects of family is the idea of having family, and also communities, is the idea of having real life role models, right? So we talk a lot about representation in media, but one of the pieces that we have from our youth is literally titled Queer Representation Beyond Media. And how she explores this is, as a Chinese Catholic queer youth, what role models does she have in real life that she can help envision what her future might look like? Another theme we often get around is around attractiveness and desirability standards. And this definitely is specific to racialized migrants and immigrants. We have pieces that talk about being over-sexualized or fetishized. There's a piece on the fetishization of East Asians, how this both can affect not just people who decide to exoticize us, but also how that plays into our dating preferences and the ideals we take on. Another piece talks about being undesirable because of Eurocentric ideals of beauty. Is it me or my ethnicity is a piece that's written by Rami, and it talks about navigating grindr culture for a Desi gay man and how body image is validated by the media and how that affects our sense of self.
Thank you. So in terms of just continuing Eleni's talk about what we see among our writers and artists, once youth see themselves reflected in the pieces, it also relieves them of the burden of representing, of being the spokesperson for the whole culture. And so again, it's returning to this idea of adding nuance to the conversation so that you aren't pigeonholed into a certain narrative, and you can speak your truth. And so what that truth means is to share something without having people stigmatize your narrative. And sometimes that means speaking more candidly about difficult things that happen. So let's say one of our writers, Anonymous, speaks about how domestic violence plays out in South Asian culture, specifically in her family. And it's important to have that space to be candid and honest about her experiences without feeling like she's going to add to the stereotype of South Asian men who would contribute to the overall culture. And so beyond that as well, it's also that we've had a number of pieces about the importance of sexual healing, of boundaries, and finding a space to honor each other's pains and struggles and trauma. And trauma here isn't just defined specific to sexual violence. It's intergenerational trauma. It's trauma that comes from institutionalized forms of oppression, of racism, and what that does to inform ourselves, of our sense of culture, of our sense of self. And the reason why we get so many pieces about trauma as well is that trauma causes such a discord and disconnection to your body. It's not just health is usually understood as a bodily equilibrium, but from what we've seen, it's a wellness that encompasses the emotional, the psychological, the mental, even the spiritual. And so a number of people also talk about their survivorship in relation to their sexual and reproductive health and wellness, and what it means to come into an erotic embodiment, find joy, find pleasure again. So part of all our pieces that come out, as well as attending to the political landscape in which we live, as these define a number of sexual and relational experiences that we have, because they also speak to how safe immigrant, racialized, or certain queer bodies feel to explore their sexuality. And so what this means, as Mari Ramsiwak explores with regard to the Bruce MacArthur case and how that has affected a number of South Asian, specifically South Asian queer men, and how this impacts the larger South Asian community, and even certain writers who identify as female, what that means for themselves to reflect on these cases of violence against people within their communities. I will sum up. And so, to sum, I think we are still seeking more voices, because from our platform so far, it's been pretty Asian dominant in terms of our writers, and we also acknowledge the fact that we have a lot of work to do to include Black, Latinx, and West Asian and Southeast Asian voices in what we are able to produce in the content we produce.